Well, I was at youth camp on last weekend, and at the ripe old age of 29, I came away feeling very elderly. It was harsh and humbling. So to prove that I am still young, hip, that I can still, slap, I'm not sure if that's the right way to use that word, we're starting today with a meme. This meme documents an imaginary conversation between Jesus and a guy named Keith. Keith, we commemorate the day you died every year. Jesus, that's nice. What's the day called? Keith is silent. Keith is still silent. Jesus, Keith, Bad Friday? Well, today is Good Friday. And in some ways, it's strange that that's what the day's called. Good Friday rather than Bad Friday. You don't have to know a lot about the Christian faith to realize that today I'm going to be talking about a pretty familiar image. Jesus on the cross. It's a gruesome image. It's not pretty. In fact, it's pretty dark. But it is a really famous image. A lot of people, regardless of their faith background, know the gist of it. Jesus dies on a cross to help make the world a better place or something like that. It involves this thing called sin. And because of that, I'm supposed to be nicer or something like that. Kind of, but not quite. That version of things is like looking at the corner piece of a jigsaw puzzle. Technically, you are looking at the image that the jigsaw puzzle's showing you, but you aren't seeing the whole picture. You aren't seeing the complete image. Well, before we fill in the pieces, let's look at the problem. Let's look at the empty spaces that need to be filled. It starts with a bad decision in a garden between two people. It's another image that a lot of people are familiar with. Naked man and naked woman listening to a snake and thinking about eating fruit. In some ways, it's not the most relatable image. My experience with talking snakes has been minimal, if non-existent. But in other ways, I think that we all face the temptation to listen to the talking snake, to give in to temptation, to move away from God, to move away from our Creator. The decision to give in to temptation, which a lot of Christians know as sin, could also be described as disordered love or disfigured love. And this sin, this disordered love, causes this awful cycle of suffering and evil. But God, the creator of light and life, has a plan. Through humans, sin was allowed to roam free on the earth and enter into the hearts of humanity. Well, through a human, sin would be defeated. Only that human would also be God. Enter one Jesus of Nazareth. In our next scene, we find Jesus in a garden with his disciples. And if we've learned anything from the Garden of Eden, we know that gardens can attract snakes. Enter Judas, the disciple of Jesus who's betrayed him for money. Judas walks towards Jesus with his soldiers, officials from the chief priests and Pharisees. They carry torches, lanterns, and weapons. Jesus goes out to them and asks, "Who is it you want?" even though he already knows the answer. The inevitable reply, "Jesus of Nazareth, I'm he." At these words, those coming to arrest Jesus draw back and fall to the ground. Why? Was Jesus suffering a particularly profound case of bad breath? Did the group have a collectively bad case of vertigo? I don't think so. I think there might have been something about standing before the God who created you and hearing him say his name, I am. The scene in the garden concludes with Jesus allowing himself to be brought to the high priest, the high priest questions Jesus and then passes him to the Roman governor, a man named Pilate. Forgive the gender stereotypes, but if TikTok is right, as TikTok inevitably is, then men, you are just always thinking about the Roman Empire. I'm sure you've already thought about what it must have been like to be a Roman governor in Judea in the first century, so forgive me for going over old material. But Pilate would have been used to seeing criminals, revolutionaries, people who wanted to usurp Rome. Pilate's a man of the world. He's a successful gentleman. He's all political savvy, networking brunches, Rolex watches. What did he see when Jesus was brought to him? He summons Jesus of Nazareth and asks him, "Well, are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus asks. "Or did others talk to you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replies. "Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it you've done?" Jesus says, "My kingdom isn't of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place." "You're a king then," says Pilate. Jesus answers, "You say that I'm a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." "What is truth?" retorts Pilate. What is truth? Pilate doesn't realize that he's just answered that question only a moment ago. Jesus is a king. Not just a king, he's the king. Pilate, a man of the world, may very well sneer at the idea that truth is something real, something of importance. Little does he know that he's standing before his Creator, before truth itself. Later, Pilate has Jesus flogged. The soldiers twist a crown of thorns and put it on Jesus' head. They clothe him in a purple robe and go up to him again and again, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they slap him in the face. Once more, Pilate comes out and says to the Jews gathered there, "Look, I'm bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him." When Jesus comes out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, Pilate says to them, "Here is the man." Or in another translation, "Behold the man." I'm sometimes tempted to feel quite sorry for Pilate. He continues to accidentally hit the nail on the head. He doesn't realize that he's been saying some extremely accurate theological statements. Behold the man. Look at the perfect human. This is the model of humanity. This is what humans should have been like all along. Look at him. Watch what he's going to do. See Jesus for who he is. And Pilate hands Jesus over to be crucified. Criminal's death for an innocent man. His clothes are divided by the soldiers into lots and are gambled over. Later, knowing that everything had now been finished, and so that Scripture would be fulfilled, Jesus says, "I'm thirsty." A jar of wine vinegar is there, so they soak a sponge in it, put the sponge on a stalk of the hyssop plant, and lift it to Jesus' lips. When he's received the drink, Jesus says, "It's finished." With that, he bows his head and gives up his spirit. Nobody takes Jesus' life from him. He gives it up willingly. If we pause our story right here, we'll see the all too familiar image: dead Jesus on a cross. If an image is worth 1,000 words, I wonder what words we might use to describe this image. Helpless, defeated, depressing. But if that's the case, we're not looking at this image with the right lens. This is God saving the day. This is years and years and years of God's promises that he would provide a solution to the mess that humanity has made, that he'd clean up the problems that we ourselves made. This is where we see him fulfill those promises. This is the beginning of the peak of the story. This is the end of sin's authority. This is the end of darkness, and it's the beginning of the new thing that God is doing. It's the beginning of a new way of living. Well, that which is dark and evil in the world was trying to mock and defile this Jesus of Nazareth. He was in glory and victory. Behold the man. Look at the human, fully created and fully creator. Watch him. The soldiers break the legs of those who are on the cross, as this would have killed any on the crosses who were still alive. But when they come to Jesus, they find him already dead. Instead, one of the soldiers pierces Jesus' side with a spear, bringing a sudden flow of blood and water. The man who sees it has given testimony, and his testimony is true. He knows that he tells the truth, and he testifies so that you also may believe. These things happened so that the scripture would be fulfilled. Not one of his bones will be broken, and, as another scripture says, they will look on the one they have pierced. This isn't just another criminal's corpse. This is the God who sacrificed himself for his creation. His blood is mixed with water. His sacrifice is intertwined with the new life that he offers. He gave his life freely so that freely we can have life. Later, two men, one Joseph of Arimathea, a secret disciple of Jesus, and one Nicodemus, a teacher of the Jewish law, ask Pilate for Jesus' body. They prepare Jesus' body and wrap him with spices in strips of linen, according to Jewish burial customs. At the place where Jesus was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb, in which no one had ever been laid. Because it was the Jewish day of preparation, and since the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. The first mention of a garden in the Bible was the Garden of Eden, the scene of the crime, the garden where humanity fell. And here we find Jesus, God incarnate, God's solution to redeem his fallen people, in the garden. In a garden, humans fell to sin. Yet in a garden, we're seeing God's solution to that fall. So what do you see when you look at Jesus? Is he the man who's on the cross? Is he pacing gardens? Is he multiplying wine and bread? Let me suggest that he's all of those things and more. Jesus on the cross is an iconic image. We see it on jewelry, we see it on tattoos, we see it in art from all over the world. But Jesus doesn't stay on the cross. The cross is only part of Jesus' story. It's an important part, but it's definitely not the end. As Shell, Jenny, and Danny play over us, we're going to have a time of reflection. On your chair, you should find a pencil and a piece of paper, If you don't have one, put your hand up and one of Andrew or Herman will come and get you one. Let me encourage you to use this time to think about what you see when you look at Jesus. What will you hand over to Jesus? When Jesus went to the cross, died, and spoiler alert for Sunday, rose again, he defeated sin and death. He defeated evil, brokenness, darkness. Whatever it is that you're experiencing in your life, none of it is comparable to Jesus. None of it's bigger than him. It's not even measurable compared to him. Whatever it is that you're struggling with, write it down on that paper. And in a moment, we're going to hand that over to Jesus when we do communion. It could be pain, difficult relationships, hard family situations, awful work environments. Whatever it is, big or small, write it down on that paper. When we look at Jesus, when we see him, we see our Creator, the source of light and life and goodness and love. The more that we see Jesus, the more we understand that nothing compares with him.